You've probably met them, but never really noticed them. Quiet withdrawal from visibility. They don't complain. They don't ask for attention. Your older coworker who quietly fixes problems no one else can. The parent who seems strong, but strangely distant. The person who never says, "I need help," even when they probably do. And here's the unsettling part, they didn't become this way by accident. They were shaped by something most people today would struggle to imagine. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Because the psychology of Generation X isn't loud, it's silent, but it runs deep. Picture this. It's late afternoon, you're 8 years old. You walk home from school alone. No phone, no messages. No one checking in. You unlock the door. Empty house. Silence. You make your own snack. Turn on the TV, do your homework, and you wait. Not for minutes, sometimes for hours. No one asks how your day was. No one notices if something's wrong. So you stop expecting it, and slowly, without realizing it, you learn a rule that stays with you for life. If something needs to be handled, I'll handle it myself. That was normal. Not rare. An entire generation grew up like this, and that single experience rewired how they see the world, because when you grow up without constant support, you don't just become independent, you become self-reliant in a deeper way. Not the kind you post about. The kind that says, don't depend on anyone. Just figure it out. And that mindset shapes everything. How you think, how you trust, how you love. Here's where it gets interesting. Gen X doesn't just react to life. They anticipate it. They're constantly scanning for what could go wrong, not because they're negative, but because they learned early that consequences are real and immediate. If you forget your keys, you're locked out. If you mess up, no one's there to fix it. If something breaks, you deal with it. So their brain adapts. They think ahead. They prepare. They expect problems. So they're never caught off guard. Psychologists call this defensive pessimism, but in real life, it just feels like survival. Pause for a second. Think about someone you know who always plans for the worst. What if they're not anxious? What if they're trained? And then there's trust. Gen X grew up watching something else shift. Divorce rates rising. Companies laying people off. Promises breaking. The message was subtle, but constant. Nothing is guaranteed. Not relationships. Not jobs. Not systems. So they adjusted. They stopped placing blind trust in institutions and started placing it in themselves, which sounds strong. And it is. But it also comes with a cost. Because when you trust yourself above everything else, you stop leaning on others. That's why emotionally, they can feel guarded. Not cold. Not uncaring. Just protected. They don't open up readily. They don't overshare. They don't rely on emotional validation. Instead, they use something else. Humor, sarcasm, irony, not just for fun, but as a shield. Because if you can laugh about it, you don't have to feel it fully. And if you don't feel it fully, you stay in control. You see this everywhere. They'll joke about stress instead of talking about it. They'll downplay their struggles. They'll keep things surface level. Even when things run deep, and on social media, they're there, but barely visible, because to them, sharing your personal life doesn't feel natural. It feels risky. Why expose yourself when you've spent your whole life learning how to handle things privately? Pause again. Ask yourself, do you share because it helps you, or because you've been taught it's normal to be seen? Now look at how they work. Gen X doesn't need applause. They don't chase recognition. They just do the job, quietly, consistently, because their work ethic wasn't built through motivation videos. It was built through necessity, paper routes, part-time jobs early on, responsibility before comfort. So they don't respect titles. They respect competence. If you know what you're doing, they'll respect you. If you don't, they won't care what your position is. And that's why they're often skeptical of authority, not rebellious, just unconvinced. Because they've seen too many people in charge who didn't deserve to be. Financially, they think differently too. They've lived through multiple crises, the dot-com crash, the financial collapse. So stability isn't something they expect. It's something they question. That's why many of them prefer multiple income streams. Not out of ambition, but out of caution. Because they don't believe one thing will last forever. And in relationships, this is where it becomes most visible. They are incredibly loyal, but also incredibly independent. They won't ask for help easily. but they will show up for you. Quietly, consistently. No announcements. No expectations, just presence, because to them, loyalty isn't loud. It's proven over time. But here's the paradox. The same independence that makes them strong can make them feel alone, not because no one's there, but because they've trained themselves not to reach. And cognitively, they're different too. They didn't grow up with instant answers. No Google, no tutorials. If they wanted to learn something, they had to figure it out. Libraries, trial and error, failure. So their thinking became deeper, more patient, more solution-focused. They don't panic when something breaks. They troubleshoot, because that's what they've always done. And then something subtle happened when they became parents. They gave their kids more attention than they ever had, more support, more presence. But at the same time, there's this quiet concern that maybe their kids won't develop the same resilience, that maybe being constantly supported comes at the cost of learning how to stand alone. And this leads to the most important realization. Gen X isn't just another generation. They're a bridge between a world that required independence and a world that encourages connection, between figuring it out alone and having everything explained to you. They understand both, but fully belong to neither. And maybe that's why they feel invisible, because they don't demand attention. They don't perform their struggles. They don't need to be seen to feel real. They just keep going, handling things, solving problems, carrying weight, without making noise about it. But here's the question most people never ask. What happens to people who've been strong for too long? What happens when the person who never asks for help actually needs it and no one notices? Because they've trained the world not to look? Maybe the real psychology of Gen X isn't just independence. It's adaptation. They became what their environment required. Strong, quiet, reliable. But underneath that, there's still a human need. To be understood, to be supported. To not always have to carry everything alone. So the next time you see someone like this, don't mistake their silence for strength alone. It might also be habit. Years of learning that vulnerability isn't safe. Years of figuring things out with no one watching. And maybe the most powerful thing you can do isn't to fix anything. It's simply to notice, because sometimes the strongest people are the ones who were never given a choice. And maybe, for the first time, you don't have to carry everything on your own. Maybe it's okay to let someone see that side of you, the one you've kept hidden for years. Not all at once. Not perfectly. Just a small step, a quiet moment where you don't have to be the strong one. If this made you see Gen X differently, leave a comment below and share what stood out most to you. Subscribe for more deep psychological insights that help you understand people and yourself on a deeper level.